The invitation should have arrived 3 weeks ago. I sat in my cramped studio apartment above what would soon become Ember and Oak, my first restaurant, staring at the empty mailbox for the 15th time that day. October 15th had come and gone, and for the first time in 32 years of my existence, I hadn't received the familiar cream-colored envelope with my grandmother's elegant handwriting, the Morrison family annual reunion, Cedar Lake Lodge. The silence from my phone was deafening. No calls from Mom asking what dish I'd be bringing. No texts from my sister Sarah about coordinating travel arrangements. No excited messages from my cousins about the weekend's planned activities. Nothing. I picked up my phone and dialed my mother's number, my hands trembling slightly as the familiar tone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? Her voice was strained, distant. Mom, hey. I was just checking about the reunion. I haven't gotten my invitation yet. And... oh, Marcus. She sighed heavily, and in that exhale I heard 10 years of disappointment, frustration, and something else I couldn't quite place. The family decided it might be best if you sat this one out. The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean, sat this one out? It's our family reunion, Mom. I haven't missed one since I was 8 years old and had pneumonia. Marcus, you know how things have been, ever since you dropped out of law school to pursue this cooking thing. Your father and I, we just think... My cooking thing? I interrupted, my voice rising. Mom, I'm opening my restaurant in 2 weeks. This is my career, my passion. And look where it's gotten you, she snapped, her voice sharp. Living in that tiny apartment, working 16-hour days for what? So you can serve overpriced food to strangers? Marcus, you had a full scholarship to Columbia Law. You threw away a partnership track at Morrison and Associates, your own family's firm, for this fantasy. The familiar argument. The same disappointment. But this time felt different. Crueler. So that's it? You're punishing me by excluding me from our family tradition because you don't approve of my choices? We're not punishing you, sweetheart. We just think maybe some time apart will help you see reason. Come back to law school. Your father can make some calls. Get you readmitted. I hung up. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, suffocating. I walked to the window and looked down at the restaurant below, my life's work spread across the construction zone of what had once been a failing diner. For 5 years, I'd worked 3 jobs to save enough money for this place. I'd spent every weekend for the past year gutting walls, refinishing floors, and installing equipment mostly by myself. And my family thought it was a fantasy. That evening, I called my sister Sarah. She at least picked up on the first ring. Marcus, I was wondering when you'd call. Did you know about this? About me being excluded from the reunion? A long pause. Look, I tried to argue for you, okay? But Dad was adamant. And honestly, Marcus, you have to understand how this looks from their perspective. How what looks? You disappearing for months at a time while you're working on this restaurant. Missing Christmas last year because you were too busy with prep. Not returning calls. It's like you've already written us off. I've been working, Sarah. Building something. I thought you understood that. I do understand. But understanding and agreeing are different things. Maybe Mom's right. Maybe you need to step back and think about what you really want. I want my family to support me. We want you to be successful, stable, happy. I am happy. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you sound miserable. After Sarah hung up, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat in my kitchen, surrounded by recipe cards and business plans. I thought about all the Sunday dinners I'd missed while working double shifts to save money, all the phone calls I'd cut short because I was exhausted, All the times I'd chosen my dream over my family's expectations. Maybe they were right. Maybe I had pulled away first. But that didn't make the rejection hurt any less. The next morning, I found myself scrolling through social media, something I rarely had time for. There it was, my cousin Jake's Instagram story. The entire family gathered around the long wooden table at Cedar Lake Lodge, the same table where I'd sat every October for as long as I could remember. 43 family members, all smiling, all together. All except me. My spot, third seat from the left, next to Grandma Morrison, was conspicuously empty, filled instead by a basket of breadsticks. The betrayal crystallized into something harder, colder. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd replaced me with carbs. I screenshotted the image and stared at it for a long time. 2 weeks later, Ember and Oak opened to a line around the block. The food critics came first. City Paper's restaurant reviewer called my braised short ribs transcendent and my butternut squash risotto a love letter to autumn. Metro Weekly featured us as their rising star of the quarter. Within a month, we were booked solid for 6 weeks out. Success tasted different than I'd imagined. Sweeter, but with an edge of loneliness I hadn't anticipated. I threw myself into work with renewed intensity. 16-hour days became 18-hour days. I developed new dishes, refined old ones, and slowly built what food magazines would later call one of the most innovative menus in the city. The accolades piled up. James Beard nomination, Food and Wine's Best New Chef shortlist, a feature in Bon Appetit with a full spread photo of me in my kitchen, looking confident and successful. I mailed copies of every review, every article, every mention to my parents' house. I never received a response. 6 months. After opening, I hired an events coordinator and began hosting private parties and special dinners. The money was good, but more importantly, it gave me a platform to showcase what I could really do when I had complete creative control. That's when the idea started forming. It was December when Sarah called. We hadn't spoken since that conversation about the reunion, but her voice on the phone sounded different, smaller. Marcus? I saw the article in Food and Wine. Congratulations. Thanks. Listen, I know things have been difficult between you and the family, but I want you to know, I'm proud of you. What you've built, it's incredible. The praise felt hollow. Too late. Is there something you need, Sarah? Actually, yes. Tom and I are getting divorced. Tom was her husband of 8 years, a corporate lawyer at Dad's firm. I wasn't surprised. Their marriage had always seemed more like a business arrangement than a love story. I'm sorry to hear that. The thing is, I need somewhere to have my birthday party next month. Somewhere that doesn't remind me of everything. I was wondering if maybe I could book your restaurant for a private event? I almost said no. The petty part of me wanted to tell her that family support was a two-way street, that she'd had her chance to stand by me and chose comfort instead. But Sarah was different from the rest of them. She'd at least tried to argue for me, even if she'd ultimately chosen their side. When were you thinking? January 15th. It would just be a few close friends, maybe 20 people. I know it's short notice. I'll check our calendar and get back to you. But I'd already decided to do it. Not because I'd forgiven her, but because it gave me an idea. The party was elegant, intimate. I prepared a 7-course tasting menu that showcased everything I'd learned in the past year. Sarah's friends were impressed, and several made reservations before they left. More importantly, Sarah was genuinely moved. Marcus, she said as I was cleaning up, this was incredible. I had no idea. I mean, I knew you were talented, but this was art. Thank you. She hesitated then. I've been thinking about what happened with the reunion. About how we handled things. It wasn't right. I looked up from the dish I was washing. No. It wasn't. I want to make it up to you somehow. What would it take? To get you to consider coming back to the family? To repair this? The question hung in the air between us. What would it take? The answer came to me like a lightning bolt. I want to host this year's reunion, I said quietly. Here. At my restaurant. Sarah's eyes widened. Marcus, I don't think. A 10-course dinner, wine pairings, the full experience. I want to show them what I've built, what they walked away from. They'll never agree to that. Then make them agree. I met her eyes. You said you wanted to make it up to me. That's how. Sarah stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. It took 3 months of negotiations, but Sarah worked her magic. Maybe it was guilt over the divorce, or maybe she was genuinely trying to repair our relationship, but she convinced the family to let me host the reunion. The conditions were strict. I would cover all costs. The menu would be family-friendly, no weird food. And if anyone felt uncomfortable, they could leave at any time. I agreed to everything. Planning the menu took me 2 months. I wanted it to be perfect, but I also wanted it to tell a story. Each course would represent a different stage of my journey, from my childhood love of cooking to the sophisticated techniques I'd mastered. But there was another layer to the menu, one I didn't share with Sarah. The first course would be nostalgia, a deconstructed version of Grandma Morrison's famous chicken and dumplings, elevated with house-made pasta and truffle oil. A reminder of what we'd shared. The second course would be disappointment, a play on the failure theme they'd attributed to my career choice. A dish that looked simple, but was technically complex. Like my path hadn't been the easy one they'd wanted for me. And so on, through each course, each representing a different emotion from the past decade. The final course would be my masterpiece, something that would leave them speechless. October approached with the weight of an inevitable storm. I'd spent the year preparing, not just the menu, but myself. I'd practiced every dish until I could make it blindfolded. I'd rehearsed what I would say when they arrived, how I would present each course, how I would handle their reactions. The morning of the reunion, I arrived at the restaurant at 5 a.m. My sous chef, Miguel, was already there, along with our core team of 6 cooks. We spent the morning prepping, each component of the dinner timed to perfection. At 6 p.m., they began arriving. My parents came first, looking uncomfortable in their formal wear. Dad kept glancing around as if searching for exit routes. Mom clutched her purse like a shield. My aunts and uncles followed, talking in hushed whispers about the fancy atmosphere. My cousins looked genuinely impressed by the restaurant's warmth and sophistication, though they tried to hide it. Sarah arrived last, with her kids in tow. She caught my eye and nodded encouragingly. 42 family members in total, the same number as last year's reunion, minus me. I greeted them at the door, wearing my best chef's coat and a smile that felt both genuine and predatory. "Welcome to Ember and Oak," I said, my voice carrying across the dining room. "Welcome to our family reunion." The dinner began with cocktails and small bites. I'd hired extra servers for the evening, and they moved through the crowd offering my signature bacon-wrapped scallops and truffle mac and cheese cups. The food was familiar enough to be comforting, but elevated enough to remind everyone that this wasn't Applebee's. I watched from the kitchen, as my family gradually relaxed, their initial skepticism melting into genuine enjoyment. Even Dad was smiling, talking animatedly with my Uncle Robert about the restaurant's design. The first course went out at 7:30, the deconstructed chicken and dumplings. I'd taken Grandma Morrison's recipe, the one she'd taught me when I was 12 years old, and reimagined it as a refined soup course with hand-rolled pasta pillows filled with braised chicken, swimming in a rich, aromatic broth. I watched through the kitchen window as they tasted it. The recognition was immediate. Cousin Jake actually laughed out loud. Aunt Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "This tastes like Grandma's recipe," I heard her say to my mother. "But somehow, more perfect." The second course was my failure dish, a simple-looking piece of seared fish that was actually a technical marvel: sous vide preparation, molecular gastronomy spheres, and a sauce that had taken me 6 months to perfect. It looked effortless, but represented hundreds of hours of trial and error. "This is the most delicate fish I've ever tasted," Uncle Robert announced to the table. "Marcus, how did you—" I stepped out of the kitchen to explain the technique, watching their faces as I described the precision required, the equipment invested in, the knowledge accumulated. This wasn't just cooking, it was artistry backed by science. Course after course, I told my story through food. Each dish was a chapter in the novel of my life since they'd shut me out. The late nights, the financial struggles, the creative breakthroughs, the critical acclaim, all of it translated into flavor and presentation. By the eighth course, the conversation had shifted. Instead of polite small talk, they were discussing the food, asking technical questions, sharing memories triggered by familiar flavors presented in new ways. "I had no idea," I heard my mother say to Sarah. "This isn't what I thought he was doing." "What did you think he was doing?" Sarah asked. "I don't know. Flipping burgers, making sandwiches." "I didn't realize. This is fine dining. This is art." The ninth course was my signature dish, the one that had earned me the James Beard nomination. A duck breast with pomegranate molasses, served with a side story about how I'd developed the recipe during my lowest point, when I'd been eating ramen noodles for 3 weeks straight and dreaming of the perfect flavor combination. As I presented it to the table, I made eye contact with each family member. "This dish represents persistence," I said, "the willingness to keep trying when everyone around you suggests you should quit." The silence was heavy, loaded. Dad cleared his throat. "Son, this is exceptional. I owe you an apology." "We all do," added Mom, her voice small. But I wasn't finished yet. The 10th and final course was my masterpiece, and it was going to hurt. I returned to the kitchen and plated the dessert I'd been working on for months, a recreation, of the birthday cake from my 10th birthday, when I'd announced that I wanted to be a chef when I grew up. Everyone had laughed and told me it was a phase. The cake was exactly as I remembered it: chocolate with vanilla buttercream frosting, but executed with the precision and artistry I'd spent a decade perfecting. I carried it out myself, placing it in the center of the table. "This is chocolate cake," I said, my voice steady but loaded. "The same cake I asked for on my 10th birthday, when I told you all I wanted to be a chef." "You thought it was cute then." "A phase?" I walked around the table slowly, making eye contact with each person. 10 years ago, you excluded me from our family tradition because you thought I was wasting my life. Because you thought this—" I gestured around the restaurant— "was a fantasy. A failure." The room was deadly quiet. "You replaced me with breadsticks," I continued, pulling out my phone and displaying the screenshot I'd kept all these months. "Literally replaced me." Gasps around the table. Sarah looked stricken. "This restaurant has been featured in 16 publications this year. I've been nominated for a James Beard Award. I employ 22 people full-time with benefits. I'm booked solid through March of next year." I paused, letting the weight of those achievements settle. But more than that, I'm happy. I wake up every morning excited to create something beautiful. I go to bed every night knowing I've made people's lives a little bit better through food, through hospitality, through art. Dad started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." I returned to the center of the room. "You taught me that family means showing up for each other, supporting each other's dreams even when you don't understand them, standing by each other even when it's uncomfortable." I looked directly at my parents. You failed that lesson? All of you. You decided that your vision of my life mattered more than my happiness. Your comfort mattered more than my dreams. The tears started then. First Sarah, then Mom, then several of my aunts. But here's the thing about family, I continued, my voice softer now. It's not just about blood. It's about choice. And I've spent the past year building a new family. Miguel, my sous chef, worked with me through 3 flu seasons without complaint. Linda, my events coordinator, helped me reorganize this entire evening around your dietary restrictions without being asked. My servers tonight volunteered to work on their night off because they wanted to help me succeed. I gestured toward the kitchen, where my staff was watching through the pass window. They celebrated with me when I got my first good review. They covered my shifts when I was too sick to work. They believed in my dream even when I didn't believe in it myself. I picked up a fork and took a bite of the cake. This dessert represents forgiveness, I said finally. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. I deserve to let go of the anger. I deserve to move forward. I set down the fork and looked around the table one final time. You're welcome to finish your meal. You're welcome to never come back. But understand this. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your validation. I have built something beautiful without you, and I will continue building beautiful things whether you're part of my life or not. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then Dad stood up. His face was red, his eyes bright with tears I'd never seen before. Marcus, he said, his voice breaking, I am so proud of you. He walked around the table and pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home after a very long journey. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. The floodgates opened then. Apologies came from every corner of the table. Tears, laughter, requests for recipes, questions about my techniques, genuine interest in my life and work. But the moment that mattered most came from my mother, who approached me as the evening was winding down. Can you teach me to make that soup? She asked quietly. Grandma's recipe. But the way you made it tonight? Of course, Mom. I want to understand, she said, touching my arm. I want to understand what you love about this. 3 months later, the Morrison family annual reunion was officially relocated to Ember and Oak. Not because I demanded it, but because they requested it. The tradition evolved. Instead of a weekend at a lodge, we now gather for a monthly Sunday dinner at my restaurant. Different family members take turns helping in the kitchen, and I've started teaching cooking classes for the kids. Sarah and I are closer than we've ever been. She's become my unofficial marketing manager, organizing events and spreading word about the restaurant through her social network. Dad even invested in my expansion plans. Not because I asked him to, but because he wanted to be part of something I was building. The revenge I'd planned turned into reconciliation, but it had to be earned. They had to see what they'd missed, what they'd dismissed, what they'd chosen to exclude from their lives. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply living well, building something beautiful, and letting the people who doubted you discover their own regret. But sometimes, just sometimes, revenge tastes even sweeter when it's served alongside forgiveness and a perfectly executed 10-course meal. Ember and Oak is now one of the city's most beloved restaurants. We have a year-long waiting list, a James Beard Award nomination every year for the past 3 years, and a cookbook deal in the works. More importantly, we have something I'd been searching for my entire adult life, a place where talent is recognized, dreams are supported, and family, whether born or chosen, means showing up for each other. The Morrison family annual reunion is still held every October, but now it's held in a place built from ambition, seasoned with determination, and served with a side of well-earned respect. And there are no breadsticks at my table.